So if you ask yourself the question, list the 3 things you're most afraid of. If you're able to list them, you're already in a unique group, a rare group of a minority, because most people do not know what they're really afraid of. Because fear, by definition, is invisible. Fear is invisible and holds us in its tentacles, trapped. And if it was so easy that we could just identify a fear and get rid of it, we would all do that. And I think fear may be, if not the number one, but one of the top factors that stops us from reaching and achieving our goals and our objectives, that stops us from really reaching and fulfilling our dreams. So let's talk about this topic, this invisible enemy called fear, and especially as we come from the holiday of Shavuot, where we did indeed marry heaven and earth, where we indeed were empowered, re-empowered to connect to the deepest levels, and yet we have these inner fears, inhibitions, insecurities. Some of them are innate, some of them are acquired, some of them came from our childhood. And what do you do about them? So of course, Yediyat HaMachla Chetzi Refuah, knowing the fear, is the beginning of any healing. But at the same time, we don't just want to know the fears. We don't just want to be aware of them cognitively. We want to be able to transcend them. And that's what the topic of this talk will be. As I said, we're empowered here by Yerushalayim itself, the name, the wholesome or the complete fear. So what exactly is fear? What exactly is fear? When you look at newborn children, for example, they have no fears. That's why they have to be watched, because they can do things that can be destructive. So when do we develop fear? Fear is connected to self-consciousness, to being aware of something. And when you're aware of it, the potential is that you may be afraid of it. You may also not be afraid of it. You may be able to conquer it. You may be able to celebrate it. But it's connected to consciousness and awareness. And now we're too self-conscious, then we begin second-guessing ourselves and begin to be paralyzed even from making any move. Most of these fears come not from our natural selves. They come from projections from those people around us. Being judged, being mocked, being laughed at, being around insecure people who are always hesitant and very tentative. All these things accumulate and they become forces that stop us from moving. On the other hand, fear can also be a very positive thing. For example, you walk into an unknown place and you don't know what kind of danger is lurking. So a natural reaction of a healthy person would be, let me walk slowly, let me walk tentatively. So fear per se can also protect us. Is this a dangerous place? Are we in a dangerous situation? Etc. So of course the key is here how to balance the two. That's why it's critical, as I discussed many times from a psychological point of view, when you want to deal with a real challenge, you can't just deal with the challenge itself. You have to also find an alternative, because unless you feed a positive energy, the negative energy takes over. Basically, it's called channeling. That's what we want to talk about, the channeling. The channeling. We have the concept, for example, Yiras Shamayim, fear of heaven. Yiras Hashem, which is a mitzvah in the Torah that talks about fearing God. Now, most people, when they hear the word fear, immediately conjures up all the negative imagery, trembling, the anger of God, punishment, punitive, and all that. But there's another definition of fear, which I mentioned earlier before, which is called awe. Yira could also be awe. When you're in awe of something, not that you fear it like you fear a thief, or you fear the night, or you fear danger, but you're in awe of it, you stand in respect, and your fear is a very healthy one. It's a fear of something greater than you are, not because it could hurt you, but because you realize that you, in context of that, are stand in a total humility. So this fear takes on a different meaning. In the Kabbalistic structure of love and awe, or love and discipline, is called chesed and gvura. Now gvura, many people see as being a negative. Gvura means severity, strength, power. But gvura is a holy attribute, a divine holy attribute, that's just as holy and divine as the attribute called chesed and love. So let's talk about love. When a person loves someone, if you follow the Omer counting, we know that the first week was chesed, the Omer counting between Passover and Shavuos. The second week was gvura. That if chesed is love, gvura is discipline. Discipline means channeling the love in a way that we can contain it. And when it rains, and if it comes down in torrents, a torrential downpour, it will destroy the field just as much as a drought. It has to come into raindrops, which is called gvuras geshamim. No one in their right mind would say that type of gvura is a negative. On the contrary, it's a spoon feeding, so to speak, to a student or to a child, intelligence or information in a way that they can absorb it. So Gvura takes on the shape of channeling, which requires discipline. Yes, it requires strength. It requires restraint. But restraint is very different than what we would think of being punitive. So you have what's called in Kabbalistic and Hasidic thought, Gvura is the Kedusha, healthy and holy, divine strength, or you could say even awe and fear. And you could say there's also Gvuras Koshes that are not from Kedusha, from Klippa, that are negative, bad forces, negative and negative fear. So just like we have healthy shame, we also have unhealthy shame. So fear in this context, fear is not fear as we usually see it. That's why I don't like to use the word fear, because it's really dominant in the English language. Fear is usually associated with the negative. But that's why awe is a better word. But it's really the other side of fear. Awe means not love, you're just running and intimately connecting to something. You stand in respect. There's boundaries, there's space, there's discipline, there's restraint. So the key thing to remember, that when we're dealing with our fears, besides the fact that we want to define what they are, which I'm going to discuss now, we also want to channel and transform and say, imagine if you were able to take the fear that you have of real or imagined, of the known or the unknown, and you'll be able to channel it to awe of something greater than you are. So you're not eliminating the fear. What you're simply doing is, why am I going to be afraid of that when I stand in awe of this? And that way it basically supplants it. So let's begin with step number one. But before, let me just mention the story, of course, of the Baal Shem Tov. Can't miss that. When he was a young child, he lost his father, and his father on his deathbed told him, his name was Yisrael, he said to him, Yisrael, remember, don't be afraid of anything but God. And this boy grew up with that type of last basically will and testament, the last message he heard from his father, don't be afraid of anything but God. So he would wander in the woods, in the forests, even in places where there was danger, and developed a strength and a confidence that allowed him to overcome all fears. You know why? Not because he was cocky and naive and oblivious, but because he had something that he was more afraid of, a force from above, God in heaven. And that awe did not let him be afraid of something smaller. Because if you're standing in the presence of something great that's always there with you, and you stand in awe of it, even in fear of it, how could something that's so small, even a creature like you, bring you fear? However, when you let go of that type of connection to something greater than you are, then you are at the mercy of the world around you, because you're part of that world. Like the concept of when you're tied above, you don't fall below. So we'll get back to this, but I want to go back to the identifying the fears. In truth, even though I asked the question at the outset, what fears do you have and how do you identify them? I would say that you don't necessarily have to list them. It can't hurt, but to dwell on them too much can also give them power. You don't want to give them power. But it's good to know what the things you're afraid of. Some people, for example, are afraid of being judged. Some people are afraid of failure. Some people feel that they were criticized every time they tried something. So they just don't go there. These are just some of the usual suspects. There are other reasons as well, obviously. There's the inner fears where we don't feel confident in ourselves in general, low self-esteem. So many of us avoid confrontation, avoid challenge, avoid anything that may get us out of our comfort zone, which leads me to another fear, the status quo of the inertia of our comfort zone. So these are fears that all of us have at some point in our lives. They may even dominate. They may affect how you are when you go to work. Ask yourself the question, do any of these or other fears, how much time do they preoccupy consciously? How much do you think about them? And I don't mean dwell every second, but I mean in general, how often do they come up? Every time you have to make a choice or a decision, do these fears crop up? How do they affect your work, your co-workers, your social life, your personal life? These are vital questions to ask because you want to have a good sense of self. Now, standing here in Jerusalem, I have to say in a very personal note, there's always for me, and I'm sure for everyone that visits this holy place, a sense of awe. Firstly, you're standing in the ground, the hallowed ground, that people, great people have walked for the last thousands of years. Do I know maybe Jacob walked past here when he was traveling to Haran. We lay down to go to sleep on the mountain, the Temple Mount, which is just less than a kilometer from here. Maybe Abraham walked here. Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues, did they look from here at the Temple Mount? There's so many things that happen. Which priests walked by? What wars were fought? So standing here is immediately the Yerushalayim that I'm describing, a Yerushalayim of complete awe, because you're standing in front of something of this nature. And guaranteed, it makes other fears melt. Doesn't mean they go away, but they stand, they overshadowed, and they pale in comparison. You see, awesome. 70 years ago, the Jewish people were being gassed. They were being decimated. 1.5 million innocent of our children were killed. And here we are, over 6 million Jews in this holy land, the largest population of Jews anywhere in the world, just surpassed the United States last year or two, and celebrating and honoring, and so celebrated Shavuos. And you see it here in the streets. How can you not be in awe of something like that? And how can that not weaken the fears, the petty fears that we have about so many matters of our lives? Now, we still have to address those fears, but I wanted to just point out that, that there's that power. Yerushalayim, it's complete, healthy fear. Well, fear of what? Not fear of an enemy. Fear and awe of something greater. You can almost say fear of me not living up to my obligation, me not living up to my legacy, to my destiny that this city demands of me. Thousands and millions of people have died to come to this land. Moses was never able to enter the promised land. And here we stand. What are you doing to live up to that? That should cause us to tremble in a positive way. Because if we're neutral about it, and we're passive about it, what impact does it have? It has to demand of us a type of sense of awe. Where am I in context of history? Where am I in context of this Yerushalayim? And yet at the same time, we have to also be able to take that and translate that into the fears that we have. So above all, would be the best way is to transcending it by taking on new commitments, new awarenesses, conquering new horizons. So if your fear is, have you reached level 50 after reaching level 49? As we know in the Talmud it says, God created 50 gates of understanding. 49 he gave to the human being, to the human race, and one remains elusive. Moses achieved all 49. And then Har Nevoy, the day he went up on the mountain, when he passed away, Nevoy, as the Maggid of Mezrich interprets, Nevoy means is the word Nun Boy. It has in it the 50 gates, the 50th gate that he only achieved then. So if your concern and your fear is, have I reached the 50th? You can imagine that you won't be busy on level 1 or level 2 with petty stuff. So the first thing is we have to commit to things that broaden our horizons, that bring us and demand of us and expect of us greater expectations, much greater expectations. Once you're dealing with that concern, and I use the word concern very deliberately, that concern, that fear, then other fears become less significant. However, if you eliminate that higher level, and as I said before, you have to be tied above, not to fall below. When you're not tied above, what happens? You become subject and you're at the mercy of which is below, which means other people, opinions, things in life. You become driven by circumstances. The key is that you want to control your destiny. You want to control your future. So then when you do list those fears, whatever they may be, then make a second list and say, okay, what are the fears I want to embrace? What are the concerns and the goals I want to embrace? That's what Yerushalayim demands of us. So though I'm standing here by the shadow of these walls, in this holiest of countries and holiest of cities, and you may be wherever you are in the world, remember, we all face Jerusalem when we pray, wherever we are, whether you're in Antarctica, whether you're in the moon. You're facing Jerusalem. And you face Jerusalem because this is where the prayers get elevated, because this was a Shara Shamayim. This is the gate to heaven. When Jacob did fall asleep, and he woke up and realized it was a holy ground, hallowed ground, he said, where was I lying? Shara Shamayim is the gate to heaven. And interestingly, the Shalah of Yitzchak Horowitz, the great 16th century, 17th century sage, mystic, in his last years, as many great giants and sages wanted to spend their last years in Israel, when he came here, he came to Jerusalem, he actually composed his last work, was the composition called Siddur of Shalah, which was called Shara Shamayim, the gate to heaven. So though he had composed his magnum opus called the Shalah Kodesh, his book, the Shalah, But the Siddur Shalah, Shar Shamayim, he composed in his last years here in Jerusalem. So wherever we are in the world, this is what we aspire to. So Jerusalem is more than a city. It's a spirit. It's a consciousness. It's a state of awareness. It's a state of awareness that allows us to recognize that with all that's going on in this world today, and there's much to fear. Look at the events that tragically happened in Orlando just a few days ago on the day of Shavuos. Look what's happening in other parts of the world. Much to fear. How do we counter that? Obviously, we have to do whatever is possible to eradicate that, to battle that, to fight it. However, we have to also do something more. Connect the things that are higher than these forces. So then you could sit in a type of peace, in your inner tranquility. Comes Shabbos, comes other days of the year, comes even every day, every weekday. You're able to connect to a place that's higher than all these fears because they precede them and they're greater than they all are. You even hear in the background some music and sounds from Jerusalem. I don't know, they're preparing for some concert, so don't mind that. It's just the natural sounds. That's what it is. So to sum up, what I was saying is the following: that we are in a time of many challenges, and with all the battles we have to fight on the ground, as SunTzu says in The Art of War, wars are won long before you fight them. It's your attitude. You go in with a winning attitude, you've won. Then it's just a matter of figuring out how to implement it. We are the Jewish people, and all of us who connect, whether you're Jew or non-Jew, connect to that spiritual foundation of strength, are connected to something that transcends all fears of the world. The deeper you connect to that, the less other things matter. It's as simple as that. As the Baal Shem Tov heard it clearly from his father, do not be afraid of anything but God. So the question is, how do we find God in our lives? God itself has become something that people have stereotyped, and the fear of God also drives fear in people's hearts, not in a healthy way. So maybe we have to erase tabula rasa, we have to erase and create a clean slate, like the Levi Yitzchak Berditchever once said to someone who was a self-proclaimed atheist. He said to him, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. We have to sometimes begin from scratch and start stepping back and say, maybe the God that I've grown up with, the God that I've heard about, is not really the God that I should be worshiping. Connect to a God that is the source of all reality. A God is not made of that reality. Not a God created in human image, whether it was your father's image or your teacher's image, but the contrary. A God who created the human being in the divine image. That divine image is what we need to look for inside of us. And you ask, where do I find it? You find it in your noble acts. You find it in small actions, good deeds. You find it when you sit down and think to yourself, what is the best part of me? You find it in the areas, what am I not afraid of? And once you begin to hold on to that, that becomes the most powerful counterforce to anything that is out there that can drive fear into our hearts. So, what are we afraid of? We're afraid of many things. The more exposed you are, which means the less defenses you have because you're completely a product, I don't want to say victim of circumstances, obviously you're going to be afraid of those circumstances. What comes tomorrow? What came yesterday? What will my father say? What will my mother say? What will society say? What will my co-workers say? Every sound here, as I said, is an Israeli Jerusalem sound, so it's all part of the experience. It's not an accident. But so you start asking yourself, what do they all say? Obviously, you become then a completely vulnerable to all the forces that make us so afraid. But when you're able to ask yourself the question, what does God say? Am I living up to the destiny? Am I living up to my calling? That's the thing you should be concerned about. And that is the driving element. Then what others say, what others do, who really cares? It's your voice. Are you expressing your voice? Are you singing your song? Because the worst possible thing is to die with your song still inside you. So here we are, right? The days right after Shavuos, the holiday where heaven kissed earth, the holiday that gives us the power to reach the greatest heights, but also the power to overcome our fears and not underestimate those fears. So it's important to realize that you can have all the great aspirations, great dreams, aspire, dream for the greatest and imagine the most, but you have to also know that you may be a product of the fears of your life. Sum of all fears, they say. The sum of all fears, the fears of our family, the fears of society, the fears of all kinds of different things that we go to therapy for. And the counterforce is to remember, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, we heard it at Mount Sinai. Every year we hear it again. We have to clean the slate and get rid of the negative perceptions we have of the divine. And sometimes to do that, we need to use language that is very secular, language that is stripped of the words that often trap us. I always tell the story about the early years of my class back in the early 80s when I decided to create a whole new language because I realized people coming to the class from the arts and entertainment world might not necessarily relate to and maybe even have negative images about God, Torah, and so on. So I use languages like instead of God, I use the word higher reality, the essence of it all. Undefined layers of unconscious energy. Instead of Torah, blueprint. Instead of mitzvahs, I use the word connections. Instead of Mashiach, destination. And it was all about fusing the inner and the outer in this journey through the connections, following the roadmap to create this total seamless union of higher and lower, upper and lower, the inner and outer, body and soul, form and function in one seamless union. Someone came over to me a few weeks later and said, "Are you talking about God?" And I said, "Yes, but don't spoil it for the others." Because sometimes when you use the language that people are accustomed to, then it elicits the fears, elicits the images, the stereotypes, and the other things that they have preconceived notions. So maybe it's a time to just start anew. Come entering the summer in this hemisphere, we're entering a new slate. Put aside other things. Write down what are you afraid of. Write down the things that you should be afraid of, things you should be concerned about, you should be in awe of, which is the divine presence in your life, your voice, why are you here in this world. And a place like Jerusalem, where I bring you warm regards from, as I said at the outset, is a place that gives us that power. Wherever you are in the world, I hope I can channel some of that power to you through the magic of technology today. So I want to finally conclude with a blessing here, standing in Jerusalem, that we should find, it was the Ir Shechuber LaYardav, all the parts of the country of Israel were divided by different tribes. Jerusalem is indivisible because it represents the unity of all of existence. So Jerusalem should be a source, that from Zion Torah should leave and should come out, should be derived, Torah, from Zion Torah should come from. And Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim, and the word of God from Jerusalem. That Jerusalem should be the real first export, should be bringing the word of God, bringing the divine presence, unity, and ultimate complete peace, the eradication of all evil, the eradication of things that we just saw in the last few days, senseless murders, in the worst possible way. And the only way that's possible to eradicate, besides what we can do militarily, which obviously we should do, is the connection we have, and the connection all of us have, whether it's Jew, Christian, or Muslim, or any person of belief or no belief, the connection that we have to the Yirah Shalom, to the true awe, the true fear, the healthy fear, to what is really meant to be something that should concern us, our calling. So regards to you from Jerusalem, Simon Jacobson here, and until next Wednesday, 8:15, I want to wish everyone a great blessing. We should have a blessing of Babana Chaim Ezeina Revicha, which is a Hebrew blessing, which means children, health, livelihood, all in abundance, in a physical way, in a material way, many healthy, good years. And regards and warm regards from Jerusalem, as you see the walls around us, these awesome walls which represent and capture the power of this ancient city. The Harabai is just right below here, which is the Temple Mount. So we should see the rebuilding of the third temple, where it will become a house of prayer for all nations. And as I said, a world of peace and harmony within the diversity of all the people of this world. Thank you very much. This has been Simon Jacobson. And please let us know if we can be of any help to you in your spiritual journey, myself and the Meaningful Life Center. Go to meaningfullife.com for more information, an abundance, a plethora of resources to help you in your spiritual journey to find meaning in your personal life. Thank you very much, and everyone be well. God bless you.